Hey guys, welcome back. This is Blue Forest. So today we're going to do an updated version of the SIG 100 list. If you're not familiar with that, it's a series I did last year where I went through every bot in the game by class, taking a look at their SIGs, both at very low level and again at max SIG. So if you'd like to check that out, I do have a playlist of that series on my channel. But I wanted to do an updated version because I have gotten some questions from people about SIGs, who should I invest in, which SIGs are the most beneficial. So I wanted to do that today. And it is very true that we're getting a lot more access to SIGs than we used to. In the old game, SIGs were incredibly hard to come by, especially for 5-star bots. But even 4-star bots took a very long time to get up to a high level. Now it's very different. We're getting a lot more SIGs from arenas, from the Sunday daily mission, from achievements. Just a lot more of them are coming in, and that's a very welcome change. At the same time, though, it does still take some time to get a bot to high SIG. And so you do want to be careful and deliberate about choosing which bots to invest those signatures into, because not all SIGs are created equal. Some are extremely beneficial to bots, others not so much. Some have a very high activation rate, others only activate once per fight. So you do want to think through which bots you're feeding those SIGs to. And so for today's purposes, I am going to focus on bots that are currently in the game and playable now. I'm not going to focus on bots that will hopefully become playable later. And I have a list of recommended bots that will either benefit greatly from being at high SIG or who will even change in a significant way, because there are some bots in the game that simply become very different bots at high SIG as compared to low SIG. All right. And so we're going to go ahead and dive in. Now I have a list of 11 recommended bots here. All of these bots, as I said, really get a significant boost at high SIG level, either because they activate very frequently or because they're very strong or they're simply game changing for the bot. Now, I should mention a couple of things. Number one is that most of these bots don't need to be at high SIG. They're just very good choices to take to high SIG because the benefit is so great. At the same time, if you like bots that are not on this list, it does not mean that they're bad bots or that they have bad SIGs. In fact, they might have very good SIGs. It's just that some bots don't need to be at high SIG at all. Other bots you probably wouldn't want to invest in because they just don't provide that much benefit. But these bots will give you a major advantage by getting up to high SIG. And when I say high SIG, I'm saying at least SIG 70 plus. That's what I mean. So let's go ahead and start with Dirge. So Dirge's SIG is Grim Mockery. This activates whenever the opponent is under the effect of fear and they miss melee attacks. He gets a 10% attack buff for 5 seconds at SIG 1. At SIG 100, it is 60%. So it does scale significantly. It becomes a lot stronger. What I like about this SIG is that it works in tandem with fear, which is very important for Dirge, and it has a very high activation rate. You can apply this over and over again. As long as you're a pretty good player, the opponent will not be able to remove fear hardly at all, and they will often miss melees. And so when you counter, you'll get these attack buffs over and over again. Now, of course, Dirge does not need to be at high SIG level. He's already great. But if you do invest into his SIG, if you use him a lot, this is a great choice to feed those SIGs because he's getting a really big attack boost. I mean, imagine getting a 50 to 60% attack buff over and over again. And in long fights, you could potentially apply this many, many times. And so this is an outstanding SIG to invest in because it has a high activation rate and it gets so much stronger at high SIG level. So that brings us to Sunstreaker. His SIG is Premium Model. Now, this is a very circumstantial SIG, meaning that it's not going to be beneficial all the time. It really depends on the kind of fight you're in, and it will need to be fairly high in order for it to be reliable. So Sunny gets a chance for a permanent melee or armor buff every time a buff on him expires. It's a 10% chance at SIG 1, that goes up to a 60% chance at Sig 100. So obviously at low Sig, it's a very low chance, it won't happen often, but it becomes much more reliable at high Sig. The nice thing about this Sig though is that Sunny gets all kinds of buffs, right? So his buffs are tied to his health, his states, right? He has his blemish state, his pristine state, he gets buffs with specials, he can get buffs with heavies, right? So he's getting melee and armor buffs all the time. They all last, I think, 4 to 6 seconds, and so they will be expiring all the time as well, which means that in the right kind of fight, particularly long fights, this has the potential to make Sunstreaker a monster, right? Now, as I said, it will not be very effective at low level because the chance is too low. It will also not be very effective in short fights because if a fight is less than a minute long, he's just not going to have much of a chance to gain many of these buffs. But in long fights, which is when you really want SIGs to shine anyway, long, difficult fights, this could make Sunstreaker incredible at high SIG because you can also stack these permanent buffs up to 10, which could mean that he's either getting this massive surge of melee damage, or even if he's mainly getting armor buffs in a fight, it would make him so much tankier. And so if you really like to use Sunstreaker, you're going all in on him, he'd be a great one to invest in if you're thinking long-term. You're thinking, higher level AMs. If we get any LOC fights back, any kind of LOC mission, he'd be great for that. Just any long fights in the game, he will be fantastic to invest in because of the potential to get so many of these buffs as long as he's at high SIG level. It's a really great SIG for the right kind of fight. So next up we have Arcee. So her SIG is Guardian's Ferocity. This gives her a chance to gain a precision buff with her specials, which does two things. It increases her crit rate, and when precision activates, it triggers her anti-evasion, which prevents the opponents from evading for 10 seconds. The thing about Arcee's SIG, however, is that you do need to get it up fairly high in order for it to be reliable, because it's about a 42% chance to activate at SIG 1 that goes up to 80% at SIG 100. On top of that, the chance goes up with the special 2 and 3. It's a 10% increased chance with the special 2 and a 20% increase with her special 3. And so if you're using her at low SIG, if she has, let's say, roughly a 1 in 2 chance, it'll still trigger sometimes, and because of Arcee's incredible power gain, she can use more specials than most other bots. Even at low SIG, you will get some use out of it. However, if you want to use her against anti-evade bots and lanes in particular, you're going to want to get that SIG pretty high in order to get it at least close to a guaranteed chance. The nice thing about the anti-evasion as well is that it is 10 seconds long, so it gives you a lot to work with. And so if she is at high SIG, it'll almost always trigger, which will give you long stretches of time that evade bots cannot evade. And another reason I have her on this list is simply because of the fact that we have very few anti-evade bots left, because the two most popular anti-evade bots from the old game, Drift and Hot Rod, are no longer with us. Dirge has anti-evasion, but it doesn't work the same way, right? He does not prevent evasion, he simply penalizes the opponent for evading. And Chromia's slow is good, but unfortunately it's not working against evade mods, which is the exact same problem that Hot Rod used to have. So unless they fix that, Chromia is not going to be reliable for anti-evasion against mods. Arcee's, however, does work against both bots and mods. So if you want a good anti-evade bot with the nice crit rate bonus as well, Arcee will be a great choice for you, but like I said, you are going to want to invest in it in order to make the precision chance reliable. So that brings us to Motormaster. So his SIG is King of the Road. This is a polarizing SIG in the sense that it won't be for everyone, but in the right hands, for the right kind of player, it's pretty incredible at high level. So Motormaster gains a melee buff for every 20% of lost health. So at 80, 60, 40, and 20, he can get up to 4 of them when he drops below 20% health. He has all 4. It's a 15% melee buff at SIG 1 that goes up to 60% at SIG 100. So it does get 4 times as strong when he's maxed out. That means that if you like Motormaster And if you're an aggressive player and you don't mind taking risks, if you like to fight with bots at low health. For example, Motormaster Sig is a brilliant one to invest in because at Sig 100, when he's below 20% health, he's going to be doing 240% additional melee damage. He becomes incredible at low health. And by the way, even if he's at mid health, if he drops below 60% health, he gets 2 of those buffs, which means he's still doing 120% more melee damage when he's at, let's say, 60% health. That's a lot of extra damage, even when he's not at very low health. And since Motormaster is all about his melee damage, the Sig is brilliant if Motormaster's playstyle suits you. On top of that, this Sig is brilliant for AMs. There were a lot of people that used to use Motormaster in D100 AMs because if he died, you would just revive him back to 10 to 15%. He would get all of those melee buffs, and then he could just go crazy. Okay, so it's a great Sig to invest in if you're aware that he's only going to be getting these buffs when he's losing health, and if it suits your playstyle, right? If you don't want to be losing health in order to activate his Sig, then you should not invest in it. But for people that really love MM and like that playstyle, it's a fantastic Sig to invest in because those melee buffs become so strong. I should mention that it is true, by the way, that we don't yet have access to AM kits, right? The Titan mission isn't back. We don't have the free kits we used to get from the Raid store, but hopefully those will return soon. And regardless, as I mentioned, if you like to take risks and do fights with bots at low health and so forth, this is a wonderful Sig to invest in. So that brings us to OGP, Optimus Prime. His Sig is Breach, which allows him to land bleeds on the opponent when they are armor broken and he crits. So his bleeds will deal 50% attack damage at Sig 1. That goes up to 140% attack at Sig 100. So the bleeds become a lot stronger at high Sig. Now, obviously, OGP does not need to be at high Sig. His bleeds are still pretty good at low Sig, and he's just a really awesome bot. However, he's on this list because, first of all, it's a very high activation rate, right? He armor breaks all the time. He crits a lot. So you're able to land these bleeds over and over again and finish fights faster. Not only that, the bleeds do become so much more powerful. They're among the most powerful in the game at very high Sig. And so if you're using OGP a lot, which by the way, most people are doing, at least for the time being, a lot of people love to use Prime. On top of that, lots of people are using the Maximus Energy, which is so awesome. This is a great Sig to invest in because those bleeds will become so powerful and help you to finish fights more quickly. A great one for longer, more difficult fights as well. On top of that, you can also use this Sig in tandem with Deep Wounds, the Mastery, because that will enhance the duration of your bleeds, make them more powerful, and you can also strike down health from the opponents with Deep Wounds when you have more health than them. So if you like to use bleed bots like OGP, Dirge, Arcee, and a few others, that means that Deep Wounds would be a fantastic one to invest in, and it's a great one for Prime. So once again, you don't have to invest in it, but if you want to take full advantage of OGP's power, get him to high Sig and just take a look at how crazy his bleeds are, because they will be incredible at high Sig. So next up we have Cliffjumper. So his Sig is First to Fight. This is a great Sig and very unique in the sense that it is effectively guaranteed, which means that he is getting one of 2 buffs at the start of the fight, no matter what, depending on what happens. So at the start of the fight, if he lands the first hit, he gets a crit rate buff for the rest of the fight. If he does not land the first hit, he gets a range speed buff for the rest of the fight as well. At Sig 1, it's a 15% crit rate or a 7.5% range speed buff. That goes up to a 30% crit rate or a 15% range buff at Sig 100. So it basically doubles. Now, Cliff is another one who does not need to be maxed out in order for this Sig to be helpful. However, if you get it up to a high level, you're going to see some pretty incredible crit damage in particular, because if you're a good player, you will usually land the first hit. And even if you don't, like I said, you're going to get the guaranteed range buff. But having 25 to 30% additional crit rate for the duration of fight makes this sig incredible, particularly for long fights, which is where Cliff really shines anyway with all of his glass gas and all of the debuffs. You know, he can really ramp up his damage in those longer fights. And so if you are all in on Cliffjumper and you're also thinking long term, you know, you want to use him in tough fights, I would highly recommend that you invest in his sig, because that crit rate will go way up. Even if you don't get it, you'll still get the range bonus. It's guaranteed in that sense. And even if you lose the buff, so if you're fighting against a tactician, for example, who nullifies the buff, it'll still come back after 10 seconds. So it's effectively a permanent sig. You're always going to have one of these buffs no matter what. And as long as you're a good player, you'll be able to get that increased crit rate almost all of the time. So that brings us to Ultra Magnus. His sig is all for one. This is a very unusual and circumstantial sig in the sense that it is based upon who's still left on your team, who's alive and who's dead, okay? I've put it on this list, however, because of the fact that it will be very beneficial in the right kinds of circumstances, particularly in AMs or in difficult fights where you have a squad and you might be losing some of your bots. Okay, so with Ultra Magnus's sig, if he starts the fight and more teammates are alive than dead, or he's alone, he gets 20% physical resistance, and that's the same at sig 1 or 100. If, however, more teammates are dead than alive, or it's tied, he gets an attack buff. If everyone is dead, he gets both the physical resistance and the attack buff. It is only the attack buff that goes up. It's 20.6% at sig 1. It goes up to 96.3% at sig 100. So it does get way stronger at high sig level. He basically doubles his attack when he maxes out his sig. So if you love to use Ultra Magnus, this is a great sig to invest in as long as you're aware that it is circumstantial. But it is great to use in AMs, for example. There were people that used to use him in D100 AMs in the old game and who would simply use Ultra Magnus last, because if one of your bots died or everyone died, then he would be getting either the attack buff or both of the buffs. And it's really the attack that you want, because UM is already very tanky. He already has lots of resistances. And so if you're using a team around Ultra Magnus and you're using him in AMs or really difficult missions where you might be losing bots and you're willing to save Ultra Magnus for last, that way you'll guarantee that you get at least the attack buff, if not that and the physical resistance. And if you get him up to high sig, his attack is going to go through the roof. So it's a great one if Ultra Magnus is one of your primary bots and you're willing to use him last in most cases. Because if he's alone or everybody's still alive or more people are alive than dead, he's only going to get the physical resistance. So it's very circumstantial, but it really will help you out a lot at high sig level in the right circumstances. So next up we have Ironhide. So Ironhide, kind of like Motormaster, it's polarizing in the sense that you have to take damage, you have to get hit in order for it to be effective. However, it does have some major advantages. Okay, so his melee reflect triggers at 75, 50, and 25%. It triggers for 7.5 seconds each time. So if you were to go from 100% down to very low health, you would get a total of about 22 seconds of melee reflection time. Now, like I said, if you don't want to invest in a sig that requires a bot to take damage, you should not invest in it. However, if you do want to take full advantage of Ironhide's melee reflect, you do need to get it up to a high sig level in order for it to be reliable. And by the way, his sig scales exactly in the same way as Soundwave's reflect. They basically copied Soundwave's sig progression onto Ironhide when they released him. So at sig 1, he has a 16.4% chance to melee reflect that goes up to 90% at sig 100. So it's a big difference, right? That means, however, that at sig 100, he's reflecting almost everything. Now, you have to bear in mind, though, that he does have to be getting hit in order for the reflect to trigger. You have to at least be blocking melees, which is very different than Soundwave's. Soundwave's is just a lot It's a lot better in my opinion just because it's more versatile. But regardless, Ironhide does require you to be eating melees or at least blocking. But it will help you out quite a bit if you get it up to a high sig level when you get in trouble. If you want a layer of protection, or if you want to use Ironhide in really difficult content like high level AMs and such, this could be a really good one to invest in, because he does damage for 75% attack with his reflections, which means that a 3 or 4 star Ironhide, the damage is not going to be massive, right, when you're fighting stronger bots, because his attack isn't that high. However, the damage will still be pretty good for a maxed out 4 star. However, with the 5 star, long term, very different story. A rank 6 max forged, max sig Ironhide is going to do ridiculous damage with his melee reflection. And more importantly, or at least just as importantly, you have to remember that every hit that he reflects, he takes no damage on, right? So it's a great layer of protection for him. And so if it suits your playstyle, if you want that safety net, if you want to be able to deal damage to the opponents when they're hitting you, and so forth and so on, it's a great one to invest in. And like I said, I would say that you really have to invest in it if you want it to be reliable. So that brings us to Mirage. So Mirage, in my opinion, this is one of the best SIGs in the game because it just has so much use and it activates very frequently. So KERS is his SIG, and he gets a special attack buff with every special he uses, and he gets one of 3 buffs depending on which special he uses. The duration of the buffs goes up in length with SIG level. So with the special 1, he gets that range bonus, which is why he can be so annoying to fight against, because those projectiles are coming so fast and it's really hard to dodge them. With the special 2, he has unblockable melees, and with the special 3, he gets a massive 90% attack buff. At SIG 1, it's 2.3 seconds long. That goes up to a pretty amazing 19 seconds at SIG 100, which means that if you're all in on Mirage, you want to invest in it at least up to mid-level, because at low level, if he's getting buffs for 3 seconds, that's not going to help you out that much, because it just isn't that much time to work with. But at mid-level, and particularly at high level, these buffs last practically forever, and you can apply them over and over again, and by the way, you can stack them. If you land a special 1, and then you get up to a special 2 while the special 1 buff is active, he'll have both of those buffs active. That's incredible, okay? So I would recommend, if you're all in on Mirage, to get it up pretty high, because those buffs will last a very long time. You can have multiple of them at a time. You can have the special 1 and the special 2 buff at the same time. You can land them over and over again. Remember that Mirage has really good power gain as well, so you can land a lot of specials with him. And there are just certain circumstances, again, especially in longer fights, difficult fights, where these will be incredible and so helpful. I mean, imagine getting 19 seconds of 90% attack after a special 3, you know? I mean, his attack is basically doubled with the special 3, and it would last 19 seconds at SIG 100. I mean, you could do so much with that. And by the way, all of these special damage buffs that he gets with his SIG also work in tandem with the buffs that he gets just from using the specials generally, like the power burn with the special 1 and the attack buff he gets with the special 3 and so forth, and when he dodges. So this is a wonderful SIG. I think it's an outstanding SIG, but you do need, like I said, to at least get it up to mid-level, and if you want to make the most of it, get it high, because these buffs will last a very long time, and you will be able to apply them over and over again. So now we come to Grimlock. So Grim SIG is Dino Rage, has 2 components. Of course, awakening him gives him his purification, and he gets a melee buffs whenever DOT is landed on him, right? So obviously the purification is exactly the same at SIG 1 or 100. It is only the melee buff that gets stronger. At SIG 1, he gets an 8% melee buff that goes up to a 30% melee buff at SIG 100, so it does scale well. The buff becomes almost 4 times as strong when he's maxed out. The main reason he is on this list is because of the fact that the melee buff does get so much stronger. And remember, Grimlock can stack these buffs, right? There's no limit on how many of these you can get. And when do you use Grimlock? You're using him primarily against DOT opponents and mods, right? He's great for bleed, burn, shock, etc. And so if you're in the kind of fight where you're getting lots of bleeds landed on you, he's going to be able to get a lot of these buffs, and stacking up 5 or 10, 30% melee buffs is going to do way more damage than 5 or 10, 8% melee buffs, right? So it's a really good one to invest in if you're using a Grimlock a lot. And I should also say that Grimlock is going to be very popular for the time being because he is really good for the new AM map in particular, because it's very DOT heavy. We've got those really annoying shock lanes. He's great for those. And we don't yet have, Beast Wars characters playable. We don't have Thundercracker. So Grim is probably going to be in wide use for a while. And so if you are using him a lot, I would recommend you get that sig up, because even though it's not necessary, he will become a lot stronger. And by the way, another really important thing about his sig is the fact that it is so easy for him to refresh his melee buffs because he does it with his heavy. So you can refresh them and keep them going for very long periods of time, and they will also stack and work in tandem with the melee buffs he's getting with his special. So the point is, if you're using Grim a lot and you're using him in the right kind of fights, like DOT fights, investing in his sig will rapidly increase his melee damage, which is exactly what you're going to want. So finally, we arrive at Soundwave. So as I said, Soundwave sig works in in the exact same progression to Ironhide's, and his sonic shield gives him a chance to reflect range shots when his shield is active. He also gets 35% energy resistance when the shield is active, so even shots that do not reflect, he will take less damage on, and that's very helpful. Like Ironhide, Soundwaves is a sig that you absolutely want to invest in if you want to get the most out of it. It has to be pretty high for it to be reliable. As you probably know, I'm a long-time Soundwave user. I've got a bunch of videos of him doing amazing and phenomenal damage with him in D100 and stuff like that, okay? The thing is, though, you have to be all in on him. At low sig and mid sig, it'll help you out sometimes. It'll save you every now and then. But if you want to really take advantage of it, you've got to get it pretty high, okay? Because it is an RNG-based sig, right? So the great thing about it is that if you know how to play him well, if you master his timing, you can keep his shield going for very long stretches of a fight because his shield is tied to his power gain. It activates for a period of time every time he gains a bar of power, then it expires, then you get it again, so forth and so on. So once you master Soundwave, you can have that shield active for really long stretches of time. And I would absolutely say that Soundwave sig is one of the most game-changing sigs in the game for sure. He is a very different bot at Sig 100 as opposed to Sig 1. There's no doubt about it, because not only is he reflecting, he is dealing 140% of the original damage. So if an opponent were to shoot a ranged special at you that would do 10k damage and he reflects it, he will deal 14k damage. He will do even more damage to them than they would have done to you. It also makes him perfect for any ranged buffs that bots have or ranged mods. He's amazing against ranged mods, and it activates not only very frequently because of the power gain, it's in use all the time because of the fact that in an average fight, opponents are firing ranged shots at you all the time, and you can reflect pretty much all of them when he's at high sig, okay? So in that sense, it is a lot more versatile and useful, in my view, than Ironhide's, because he doesn't have to be getting hit in order for it to be useful. It does not expire after 7.5 seconds, only at 75, 50, and 25% health, right? You can keep the shield going over and over again and then get it back every time it expires. And you're just a lot more in control with Soundwave sig because of the fact that you can deliberately put him in front of ranged shots sometimes when he's at high sig. Now, you do not want to do that all the time because you have to remember that it does max out at 90%, so he won't reflect everything, right? You can't just stand there and let the opponent fire off endless range shots at you. But in the right kind of fights against a very powerful range special or a very powerful range mod that you know will deal a lot of damage. There are circumstances where you can deliberately put him in front of those shots. It'll almost always reflect, and when it does, it will do unbelievable damage to the opponent. So it's a fantastic sig if you're willing to take the time to get it up to a very high sig level. And so that wraps up this version of the SIG 100 list. I hope it is helpful to you. As I said, if you like bots that are not on this list, of course, use them and even invest in their SIG if you want, but just be mindful of what their SIG actively does. Be mindful of how often it triggers. Be mindful of the benefits that it gives the bots, because some SIGs are just not going to be that beneficial. And there are amazing bots, by the way, that don't have great SIGs, but they're still amazing bots, right? Sideswipe is a good example. In the old game, MV1 would have been a great example, right? So you don't have to invest a lot into every bot that you use a lot, right? So you have to be able to differentiate between the bot and the SIG. So just be very mindful of that when you're choosing who to feed SIGs to. Number two, I know this is obvious, but definitely only invest SIGs into bots that you use very frequently. You do not want to pour a ton of SIGs into bots that you barely even use. And you want to experiment, right? You want to make sure that the SIGs that you are investing in are SIGs that you like. Because, for example, like I said earlier, for some people, Motormaster SIG will be perfect. For other people, they won't like it. So you just have to experiment and make sure that you're investing into the bots that suit your playstyle and that you use very frequently. If you do that, you'll make great decisions and you'll get some amazing use out of these SIGs. So I will leave it there for now. I hope all of you are well, and we will be in touch again soon. Take care.